You're listening to the Ryen Russillo podcast presented by FanDuel. FanDuel has made it easier than ever to see how your bets are doing without even opening the app. Because now you can get the latest updates and follow along in real time directly from your phone's lock screen or Apple Watch. No login required. Just head to your My Bets page to turn it on. And if you don't already have it, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today to get in on the action. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available and listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 and older and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Loaded on a Thursday for you. Bruce Feldman, his mock draft for the NFL, all of his contacts in the college football world, their thoughts on all of the top prospects, little tales from the couch, little OKC historical perspective. We haven't done anything on Denver, Minnesota, the game of the year, because we have Jon Krawczynski, who covers the Timberwolves, who's going to talk not only about this team, the fight with Detroit, but being in the building, that double overtime win against Denver. And, of course, an extended life advice. So a lot for you today. Enjoy the pod. With the draft weeks away, love to get the perspective of Bruce Feldman, who has a mock out now on The Athletic, so college football writer and also our guy for Fox college football coverage. The Bruce, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I like your perspective because you're just so locked in with all the college coaches and you go through it. So I don't know that there was a ton of stuff in your mock where I was like, wow, that's shocking. Maybe, the ceiling and floor and some of the other stuff that we've seen. But let's just start at the top. The perspective that you have on Cam Ward, knowing he's had a few stops in college and the coaches that have gone up against him, and a guy that, maybe in other years isn't the number one pick, but he's a quarterback. He's the best of this group. And everybody seems to have him penciled into the Titans.
Yeah, he is, from the people I've talked to, a notch ahead of Shedeur or anybody else in this draft. The coaches I've talked to don't think it's actually close. And some of the guys have played both. And also, you got to remember, both guys were in the Pac-12 a year ago when you had a cluster of first-round quarterbacks, Caleb Williams. Some of those guys played Jaden Daniels before because he was at Arizona State. Obviously, Penix, Bo Nix. Not Drake May, but everybody else. And the guys I talked to thought Cam Ward probably would be maybe a slight step below some of those guys from last year, but they think he's clearly the best one out there right now. And what they love about him is his competitiveness, his playmaking ability. His arm talent is better than Shedeur's. It comes out fast. He can do it from, basically in the RPO game. The challenge with him is he makes a lot of backyard football plays, and a lot of it comes with being really reckless with the football. And he got better at that than he was earlier in his career, but there's still a lot of concerns. One of the coaches I talked to in the ACC was like, there was a bunch of interceptions that were dropped last year that, bad decisions that he keeps making. And Miami's coaches kind of leaned into, hey, we're not going to try to change you. We want you to play a little smarter, but they weren't, really trying to coach everything out of him. The other thing you would hear a little bit is there's kind of a nonchalant style about him. There's some times you watch him in the Florida game at the start of the year where they blew the Gators off the field in the swamp. And there's a play where he's kind of running out of bounds. And if you're watching it, you're thinking, was the whistle blown dead? Why is he just like casually jogging towards the sideline? And you talk to some of the Miami coaches, are like, I think he was trying to draw like a late hit penalty if he could get it on the Gators. I think his wiring is a little different. Everybody at Miami raves about his competitiveness and his leadership skills. And that was a big addition for them last year. They were sorely lacking in that spot till he got there. And from the moment that he got there, people at Miami, were just so impressed by him. So I think he's a legit NFL starting quarterback. And I think he is the one quarterback in this draft where I was like, okay, you could see him being a star in the NFL. It's not a guarantee, but it never is with quarterbacks.
Abdul Carter to the Cleveland Browns. I would love that with Garrett. I love when teams have somebody at the same position and they're just going like, let's just have two of these guys then, even if it feels like it's not as much of a need. I was a little surprised at the Von Miller thing, maybe because I have a special place for like the Von Miller evaluation where I think his bend is unlike anybody at that size. Not to say he's the best defensive end I've ever seen, but I think specific to him, how almost horizontal he could get to the ground, turn around the tackle, and then somehow just be up and then in position to make the play. As much as I love Carter, I was almost like, man, Von Miller stuff. Where would you put Carter, not so much in this class, but in comparisons to other special edge guys, which he clearly is. But, maybe the coaches and the people that go up against these guys that keep better track based on the years of talking to them about like how Carter fits in comparison to the other game wreckers.
Yeah, the Von Miller comment was interesting. It came from a guy who used to coach in the NFL and is now a Big Ten running backs coach. And he had said to me, people want to compare him to Micah Parsons. They're similar size. Micah Parsons is going to run in the 4.4s, and obviously both Penn State guys. But this guy was like, they're really different. Some of the stuff Micah Parsons does, how he wins in the NFL is not how Abdul Carter to this point is. Now, what's really worth keeping in mind is this was really the first year that Abdul Carter had played in this position. He'd been a linebacker before, and they shifted. Our first game of the year for Fox, we were in West Virginia, and they have a really good offensive lineman, Wyatt Milam, who is one of the better offensive linemen. I don't know if he's more considered a guard because he's, again, arm length, but he's a high-level offensive lineman. He did really well against Abdul Carter when he was against him. But when you talk to coaches in the Big Ten, they're not just studying them for when they played them. They're also looking, crossover tape and everything. They felt like he really improved as the year went on. He will be physical. That's not what he's going to make his bread and butter on, though. He is a real elite get-off speed rusher guy. And I think the combination of him and Myles Garrett's another one, even though he's super strong and he's a lot bigger, has shockingly good bend around the corner. And I think that will help him. And I think you talk to coaches, and I talked to the guys at Ohio State, and they faced maybe 6 or 7 guys who are D linemen who will be probably first round picks or in that category. Obviously, Abdul Carter. They faced 2 guys, an inside and an outside guy at Oregon. They faced Pierce from Tennessee, who's a 4.47 guy, lit it up at the combine. They faced 2 guys, more inside guys at Michigan, but also first round picks. I mean, there was a lot of guys they saw. And in addition to the 2 guys they have every day in JTT and Jack Sawyer, who will probably be top 60 picks. I mean, there was they had an interesting range to see. Abdul Carter's twitch is different. Again, even, as fast as Pierce is way more one-dimensional. And people saw Abdul Carter as he's willing to do a lot more things like that. And I also think it did help. You talk to coaches, that D line they had on third down at Penn State, and 2 of those guys are coming back, Zane Durant and Deni Dennis Sutton. That was a scary group he was part of in terms of just elite pass rushers.
You have Shedeur going third to the Giants. The mocks have him all over the place. You already are making a face, so it seems like you don't like that you have him there.
I don't. Now, I'll full disclosure, I had to turn this in over the weekend. The Giants ended up taking Jameis. The one hesitation I had even going in was you talk to coaches, and the Giants system is not very easy to pick up for young quarterbacks. And I think that, especially with some pressure on Brian Daboll, it makes sense that you would take Jameis and ride with Jameis. I think if you're Shedeur or Cam Ward, I think you're like, I don't know if I want to go there. Yeah, you have Malik Neighbors, but the system is a challenge. I think the tricky part of this, with in full disclosure, when I do this exercise, it's really to show NFL draft fans, hey, you're hearing a lot from the draft analysts, and they do a really good job. But here's a completely different perspective. It's from the guys who probably know them the best because they studied them and then they game plan for them and they saw what they were, knew what they were trying to do to them. Shedeur is really polarized. He takes a lot of bad sacks. I mean, a lot. Now, he played behind a terrible offensive line that got a little better last year, but it was still pretty bad. Now, he did have high-level receivers, not just Travis Hunter. Jimmy Horn Jr. was just really explosive. Wester's a really good receiver. They had 4 guys who were, it wasn't Ohio State's receiving core, but it was not far from it, and it was better than almost everybody else had. I think the interesting part about him is he's really smart. He's accurate on the run. He will do some of the same stuff that we would see from Caleb. Now, I don't think he's as athletic as Caleb. Caleb's a better athlete, but would extend plays and buy time and do all this stuff. Caleb would get hawked down in the NFL last year. That's definitely happened if Shedeur is going to try it, So I think one of the more interesting comments I got was from a coach who said, he is super cocky in terms of that he thinks he's better than everybody else. And to some extent that helps him, but it also could burn him where he's going to have to really adjust because he's going to take a lot of bad sacks and it's going to get him in a lot of trouble.
I have a hard time believing, and I know as you're saying, like, hey, it's Jameis, and it's also the Russell Wilson contract where he feels like he's probably penciled in as the starter. Although, who knows what will happen. I think the Dable part of it is fascinating too, because I don't know that I'd want to bring in a rookie quarterback with a coach that, if it's a bad season, it's probably a guy that gets cycled out. And then I think the coaches will selfishly, which I don't really blame them for doing it, but the self-preservation of, well, let me play the rookie sooner than we should be playing him, because if it looks good for a few weeks, then it ends up like a Freddie Kitchens deal where it's like, well, maybe I get to stick around. Now, Freddie wasn't the head coach at the time, but there was the idea that he had the relationship with Baker and got more out of Baker. So that's why he becomes a head coach. So I think you'll see coaches at times go, all right, my move here, even if it doesn't even make sense for the player necessarily, but if I can get something out of this young guy going forward. The Shedeur part of it, like I'm with you on the sacks. If you watched it, he takes a lot of bad ones. I wouldn't dispute any of that stuff. I think that it was so one-dimensional that I was at times more impressed with him finding a way to make plays, because I think he does kind of fit the profile of like, he's a baller. Like, let me just get out there, play football, and kind of see what happens. That less regimented style probably isn't everybody's favorite if you're an offensive coordinator trying to game plan on Sundays in the NFL. But the line of scrimmage throws, it's not just him. It's a lot of these college offenses. Did anybody tell you, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff in there that we're just not going to run, and there's not enough intermediate stuff. Deep ball stuff's great. Too much stuff at or behind the line of scrimmage, and the in-between place where you need to live at times, like, we don't even know if we have tape on him being able to throw any of the underneath stuff.
Well, it's hard. It's a hard translation. I mean, there's two things where I think stand out. One, he is really tough because you see him keep battling, and I do think he's very smart, and you could kind of see that. But some of the other things that you're talking about, and again, his offensive coordinator this past year came from the NFL. Shermer had, lifetime NFL guy. I think they also had no run game. It's really a weird evaluation for, on both quarterbacks, to be honest, because what you would see a lot, and you talk to coaches who faced a lot of Cam Ward, and they would say it feels like a lot of backyard football. And a lot of this stuff was when you had a quarterback. Now, Cam Ward had a good offensive line. Shedeur did not. And I think so much of what I definitely give Shedeur a lot of credit for is they were horrible before he got there. Now, he got there with Travis and he got there with his dad, and they worked together really well. I would give him a lot of credit for that piece of it, because I don't think that's insignificant. They went from 1-11 getting blown out in almost every game before they got there to being competitive. And then in year two, they finished in the top 25. I just think there's going to be a lot of growing pains of the transition for some of the things you're talking about. I think he can do it. You talk to coaches who, it's not like he has Justin Herbert or Josh Allen's arm, and I don't think he even has Cam Ward's arm, but he has a good enough arm, and he's really accurate on the run. There's a lot of stuff in there that I think will translate well. It's just, I think the growing process of what he came out of to this, I think, is more of a projection. Whereas some of the stuff you see with Cam Ward in terms of just the ball comes out fast. And I think some of the stuff he can do where it does fit into that category, like middle infielder things that you hear a lot of with quarterbacks in the last decade, which I feel like really kind of started a lot from Aaron Rodgers and some other guys. I think there's Cam, you can see it at least and say, okay, the NFL game is, and it's been like this for a little while, but has become more like the college game. And I think that stuff translates, whereas it's not to me as apparent with Shedeur. I do think Shedeur could be an NFL starter. I just think there's a lot of stuff that you kind of like hold your breath on with him.
Yeah, totally agree though on the toughness. I mean, that guy got beat up for 2 years and got up every single time. All right, one of my favorite. There's a couple other guys that I want to do, maybe some bigger picture stuff. Vegas 6th pick, Jalen Walker out of Georgia. I've seen Williams ahead of his teammate here. Williams came back, later into the season, but I know Georgia was loaded. That was at least the front and probably the best unit on a team that had a disappointing season based on their standards. But I love seeing this only because I felt like he was a guy consistently on Saturdays where I was like, okay, well, he has to be the next one from Georgia, even if it felt like it's been Williams with more momentum, I think, in other mocks.
Yeah, well, look, Williams is bigger. He's the more prototype size. He's 6'5", 260 plus, and he'll probably get bigger. Jalen Walker's under 6'2". One of the comparisons I got was Will Anderson. Will Anderson's been is a great player at Alabama. Has been a big time addition for the Texans. He's not quite as long as Will Anderson. Will Anderson is bigger than him. But when you talk to the coaches, especially like the Texas coaches, they saw him twice. And they have good offensive linemen. They have 2 guys. One guy who's I think will definitely be a first round pick. The other one probably maybe shouldn't have come out this year, but has first round ability. And he abused those guys. And those guys saw other like the Ohio State guys. They saw some first round players. Jalen Walker is probably the best player they saw all season. I mean, he was a off the ball linebacker who could be really, really good at that. And he can be really, really dangerous as an edge rusher. The Georgia people I know rave about him. I think he's one of the safest picks in the draft. And I don't know if he's the best player in the draft, but I think he really is in the discussion. You could make a case that he was the most impressive player, maybe not named Travis Hunter, in college football last year. And I would include, Genti had an amazing year, but one guy was doing it in the SEC every week. And the other guy was doing it, in the Mountain West. I just think it's almost a different kind of football. And in the biggest games, Jalen Walker went off. I mean, you look what he did against Texas, and they just could not handle him at all. And I do think he's going to be a problem for people. And again, the intangibles stuff only makes me like him that much more.
The number of times I would see him chase down a guy that he's not supposed to chase down, like that would be whether it was like a really good, faster quarterback or whatever. I mean, most quarterbacks you should be able to catch, but there's just a lot of plays too. It's not just destroying the tackles. Like that Texas first half was horrifying. We referenced it all season. I thought it was like the best effort from any unit for one half in maybe the entire season of college football and what they did to NFL linemen for Texas. But there's also moments where you think he's out of the play and then he's still chasing it down and catching, a skill guy that you just wouldn't expect. All right. This one probably was a little off menu here, but you went Jahdae Barron, the corner over Texas, out of Texas over Will Johnson from Michigan.
People really love, I feel like he improved a lot last year from where he was, just really instinctive, makes a lot of plays. Both guys, I think, see the game at a higher level than a lot of defensive backs. Talking to people who've coached Will Johnson, they think he prepares like a quarterback, which is about as high a compliment as you can get for a cornerback. There are some concerns about his speed. Now, he's a bigger cornerback. He's legit 6'2". I know he was 194 or 195 at the combine. The coaches who had him say he plays at 205. He got down. I think the questions about his speed, they say he'll probably run somewhere between 4.45 and 4.48. He was inconsistent. Now he played last year. He had turf toe, caused him to miss a lot of the season. He's the guy who will probably get a bunch of pick sixes because he sees the game quick, he triggers fast, and he's looking for it. I mean, I feel like he's more of the zone corner who can do a lot of damage and make a lot of big plays. Barron, I think there's more versatility to him. He could be your nickel back. He could do a lot of things. Now he's not super big. He's smaller, but in terms of, I think one guy probably going into the start of the 2024 season was higher regarded, and that was Will Johnson. I think coming out of last year, in part because of how much better Barron looked over the year, I think his stock boosted up. But I think it's going to be a what flavor of ice cream do you like? I think both guys are going to be really good NFL players. I think Will Johnson in the right system could be a Pro Bowl guy, but I do think that Barron is a little more versatile.
You have Dallas taking Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina, 12th. How many people do you think you've talked to in college that actually think Hampton will be the better pro than Genty?
There's a little of that. I mean, I would say this. There's a guy you and I both know who I think probably might lean that way too. I don't want to say any more than that. But like Hampton, one of the coaches I talked to who'd been in the ACC for a decade said he's one of the 3 best running backs I saw in the last decade. And he put Dalvin Cook and ATN from Clemson, who's now with the Jaguars, in there. I mean, he is a punishing big back who is faster than you think. I mean, he's linebacker size. And I think because of it was such a weird year for North Carolina, they give up 70 in a game to somebody they shouldn't have. And Mac Brown, is he in or out? It's the year of post-Drake May. And I think he got kind of slept on a little bit. Well, the people in the ACC know he is really, really talented. I mean, with running backs, it's hard to project who's going to be the guy who breaks out and who's going to be the guy who kind of a little disappointing in the NFL. I mean, if you told me Caleb Johnson ended up being a beast in the NFL, it wouldn't surprise me. If you told me Tootin ended up being from Virginia Tech, who's the fastest of all of them, ended up being an impact guy, it wouldn't shock me. Now, he's got to take care of the football better. But Hampton, I think, is one of those guys where, usually he's a one of two. Now you see it certainly with the Lions. You have Gibbs is the home run hitter a little more, but the other guy is usually that punishing running back who will go between the tackles and do a lot of the heavy lifting. But Hampton's a guy I think can break runs too. I would not be surprised if he ended up being the better running back between he and Genty. I'm not saying Genty's not pretty special, because I think he is. His contact balance and what he did last year was remarkable. But I don't think there's a huge drop off between he and Hampton, because both are really, really good all around backs who are really, really good catching the football too.
Do you feel like 14 for Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, to the Colts? I mean, it makes sense, but do you think that's closer to his ceiling in the draft or the floor of where he could go?
I think it's the floor, because I think he's a guy who's still pretty raw in terms of what he is as a tight end. One of the coaches I talked to said he's more Gronk than he is Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, this is not a knock, but is more in the H-back size. This guy's a big dude who was a quarterback in high school, and they found all sorts of ways to get him the football. I think he was awesome last year. If you talk to a lot of people in the draft space, I think they thought Colston Loveland was the better prospect going into last year. And I think it's flipped now. Part of it was Loveland was playing banged up last year. Part of it was Loveland had really bad quarterback play and no receivers around him. Now, Penn State didn't have a great group of receivers either, but their offense wasn't as atrocious as Michigan's was last year. But I do think, I like Tyler Warren a lot, because I think he's a real big receiver. He's a willing blocker. There's some interesting. This is I think a pretty good tight end group, and there's guys even further down. There's a tight end coming out of Iowa who I think could end up another one who's a good player. There's just a bunch of guys in there that I think will be able to really contribute. This is one guy who I would say, yeah, I could see him as a Pro Bowler within 2 years, and I think he keeps getting better and better because we saw his development, how much better he got this year in Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator last year at Penn State. He found ways to get him the ball, and he was a huge problem for defenses every week.
Let's talk bigger picture stuff here. Is there someone the NFL guys love and the college football world is like, oh, that's weird? Or maybe you could give us an example of the reverse of that. A player that college football guys loved, and it's like, how come the NFL doesn't like this guy more? Like, how is this guy projected as a second or third rounder? I just want to know if there's a player or any examples of the disconnect between these two football worlds.
Like Jack Sawyer was a great football player at Ohio State. He helped them win a national title. He was a great program guy. I don't. I think he'll probably play in the NFL for a long time. But I think that in terms of maybe the twitch that teams want to see, I think there are worse football players who are going to get drafted much higher than him, because they will roll the dice on somebody being a lot more explosive than just a guy who plays hard every down, makes a lot of plays. And Jack Sawyer is a really good football player, but I think he's one where you will see a handful of guys who didn't make anywhere near the plays. Shamar Stewart, James Pierce. I mean, there are guys like that who I think are tougher evaluations, but I think the traits end up selling them on somebody going. And honestly, even JTT is probably a better all-around athlete, really good basketball player. He's a guy that I think, people, I think they see a little more upside in him. I would be happy if my team got Jack Sawyer in the 50th pick in the draft or something. But I think he's one of those guys that fits in there. I think another one who's like that is T-Mac from Arizona. T-Mac has unreal ball skills.
I'm so glad this was going to be my next thing, because now after this college football season, I get it was a disaster for Arizona, but he went from like maybe the best receiver, depending on how you want to classify Hunter, to now he's slow and lazy and annoying. It's just off the charts how much momentum is going against this guy now. And you have him, going 18th to Seattle?
Yeah, he is, to me, he has the best. I'm trying to think I have to go back a bit. And the same thing happened where I talked to, defensive coordinators were like, he has the best ball skills I can remember of a player. That they've faced. I mean, he was an elite volleyball player who's 6'4", he's about 220. Now, I don't know what he'd run the 40 in. Maybe 4.62, maybe 4.55. It's not going to be Restrepo, but it's not going to be super fast. But the funny thing is,
Restrepo. Jesus.
Hey, I would take Restrepo on my team. Restrepo is the all-time leading receiver at Miami, and there's been Hall of Fame receivers. And only one guy had more 60-yard catches than Restrepo. He's not the go ball guy, right? But anyway, I digress. So Jimmy Doherty is the offensive coordinator at Washington, and he was at Arizona and helped get T-Mac to Arizona from out of Southern California. And I remember we talked about him, and he was like, "Yeah, I think he's got like a 40-inch vertical." And you'd watch him, you're like, okay, I can see that. Again, elite volleyball player growing up. You see the videos all over Instagram of the volleyball players just, doing stuff that basketball players don't look like they can get that height. Well, I asked T-Mac, I was like, what do you jump? And he said probably 34 inches. It was 32. And now he goes, I know people think it's higher, but it's all my timing. And some of it is also like 1-2 step as opposed to, it's not a pure vertical jump. It's like, you're in the NBA world, it's the max vertical versus, what you see in the combine. But when the ball's up in the air, he's getting it. So, one of the coaches I talked to said, he goes, those 50-50 balls with T-Mac are 90-10. And as for the laziness thing, because I didn't realize the laziness thing was as big a thing until one of the coaches was like, people say that, but he never came off the field. And everybody knew, whenever they needed it, the quarterback, who was his best friend, Noah Fafita, since 8th grade, was always going to him. There was nobody else you worried about at Arizona. I mean, they were atrocious last year. I don't know how, even if he went 9, and I'm not saying he will, or, the Bears don't need somebody at 10, I don't think. Even if he went in the top 10, I'd be like, yeah, talent wise, he's got rare ball skills. And, again, I think if you've watched him, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's a dude. I would not doubt that he will be a Pro Bowler, 6-8 times over.
And remember too, I think the number was a 4.48 at his pro day, but then immediately everybody, I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. I'm with you. I feel like I watched them enough. I mean, granted, I went into the season with Arizona being like really excited because of how much fun they were 2 years ago. And with Fafita, they were just a really fun team. And then it falls apart. But when you did watch, you're like, yeah, but there's nothing it's first down doesn't work, second down doesn't work. Then Fafita scrambles around trying to figure out if McMillan's going to win the ball. And I liked it, the 50-50 ball, because that was always my thing with DeAndre Hopkins is there's no such thing with a 50-50 ball with DeAndre Hopkins. Like, it's his ball. And that reminded me, like, look, I don't think he's going to be DeAndre Hopkins because I think Hopkins at his best was probably a top 5 receiver in the NFL. But it just feels like momentum-wise, McMillan is going in the wrong direction for a dude I absolutely love. But look, it doesn't mean that everybody that we love on Saturdays ends up being an all-time NFL guy. So, do you have anything? I didn't prep you for this. Do you have anything on the college guys that you talk to of like which front offices are really just dialed in? Because granted, there's a lot of guys who work for these teams and just, hey, these guys do it the right way. These guys are putting in the amount of work that you need. They're asking the right questions. Like this group, these NFL teams, they get it.
It's who you'd expect. It's the Eagles, in terms of like, who's getting great players? It's the Eagles. The Eagles getting Cooper DeJean last year was like, that's perfect fit. Like you're talking about a guy when you'd watch him and you'd be on the field and you watch him on special teams and he's a beast. And, he would get compared to Riley Moss, who was a good player, but you just see why, Iowa white cornerback from, but physically they're very different. And you get guys like this. They took a cluster of guys from Georgia. Obviously, they were fortunate that Jalen Carter fell to them and he didn't even fall that far. But like, I think it's like the biggest thing with what Howie Roseman and the Eagles have done is like they keep the main thing. And I feel like they don't overthink things. And I think sometimes a lot of franchises probably outsmart themselves by trying to be too counterintuitive. I don't even know if that's the right, application of that term here. But I just think that like it's the teams who do the right thing. For a long time, it felt like the Commanders were picking wrong because it was just like the franchise was jinxed. And then you get good player, you grab Debo, you're making smart decisions. To me, it's like kind of what the Ravens have always done. It's like you kind of get best player available who fits. And then it's like you work from there as opposed to you shoehorn some guy who you think needs, even though he's probably 12 slots below your best player is at that point. And I think ultimately that's what's a difference. I'm not saying fit doesn't matter because it certainly does, especially with quarterbacks and, how you surround them. But I just look at the teams that are the best. Again, the Ravens have been really good for a long time because I don't think they overthink it. They take really good players who I feel like, you see it in Lamar. Like, I work with Mark Ingram now. You totally get like the football guy who's like just ultra competitive. And those guys, I feel like, and I've had this when I was at the combine. You just remember talking to, one of the coaches I know really well. We went out for beers and he was talking about the meetings and who you feel in the room. Those guys are usually not the ones who end up disappointing you in the NFL. It's the ones who are like overcoached and trying, it's just, and I feel like those are the organizations that can't get out of their own way just because they forget what the main thing is and they just don't even know it. And that's why, we see these constant teams that are typically really good because they just have a great feel for this is going to work. This part will translate. We're not sure if he's going to check every box, but we want this guy in our locker room.
Is there a guy that is going in the second round? Like he's going to go in the second round that either you can't believe or the college coaches that you talk to can't believe?
There's been some times where I've seen Emeka Buka not that high. And I'm like, I don't get it. He's not a small receiver. He's bigger than some of the guys who come out of Ohio State. I remember when he was a freshman, we had Brock Heward was my analyst, and our TV crew was in there, and he asked Ryan Day, who was the guy in the program you'd say I could totally see him as a football coach because I just think he's super smart. And Ryan thought about it for a while. He goes, we have a freshman. He talked about Emeka, and Emeka was that guy. And as a true freshman.
As a freshman.
And again, Ohio State has a lot of football savvy guys in there. Look, another Ohio State guy I think will be a really good NFL player. Cody Simon was a linebacker who went from being good to borderline great last year. You can't shut James Laurinaitis up about him when like he's the position coach. He obviously had a really good NFL career himself. Like those guys, I think will end up being 10-year pros and be really, really good. I don't know where Simon's projected to, how far projected to go. I mean, when you see him in warmups, he looks like he spent a shit ton of time in the weight room. He's like, almost like one of those guys who say, oh, that guy probably be a good bobsledder because he's like super explosive and you wonder, be good on special teams. And then last year, he really blew up and made plays all over the field. I could see him being like, I know that's not always a position where people are drafting it high. Like Edgerrin Cooper was an elite athlete at Texas A&M, and I think he's going to be he's already been really good. But 10 years ago, I think Edgerrin Cooper probably is a top 10 pick because of his traits and everything else. And that position sometimes slides down. But I think those two Ohio State guys, again, I'd be surprised if Ibuka doesn't go in the first round. But if he doesn't, we see all the track record of the Ohio State receivers thriving in the NFL. He's super smart. He's very physical. And also, another one I would throw in, Jalen Noel from Iowa State is a beast. People one of the coaches compared him to Hines Ward, and super tough. There's two really good receivers from Iowa State, 6'4" one, a 5'11" one. The slot, people like a little more who played him just because they think he's just incredibly tough. And I think that guy will end up making a team really happy too. I mean, those are the ones that come to mind. Certainly, like I said, the two Ohio State guys, I haven't seen Simon, anyone talking about him, in the top 40. So I feel good saying he will overproduce wherever he goes.
So wait, so you're saying people like Higgins more?
No, I think because Higgins is, he ran really well at the, in Indy, and Higgins is bigger. He's obviously a big receiver. He's got really good size, and he is a really good football player. The slot is the guy, the coaches I talked to were like, they thought he was the one who impressed them even more. Again, not to knock Higgins. Higgins probably will turn out to be, I don't think it's exactly the Allen Lazard because you have another similar size receiver, same program, but he's good. He's fast. But Noel is like one where he was one people really, really talked up. I mean, there was a handful of guys that they weren't going to be first round guys for what I was working on, but the coaches would talk about them way, way more than I think I was hearing in draft chatter. Like Iowa has a defensive lineman, Yahya Black, who's a giant of a man. He's 6'5", 335. And they really talked him up. Like he will be a starter in the NFL, at least on first and second downs. I don't know if he goes in the third round where he goes, but there are a bunch of guys like that who coaches just think, all right, I know he's not a first round guy because people are looking for for something a little different there, but they're going to be really good football players.
You have a title game matchup for us?
Not yet. I mean, look, I think if Sark doesn't win a national title in the next 2 years, I'd be surprised. I like what they have coming back. I think Arch is going to live up to it. They have really good players on defense. If you ask me, right, Texas, I would say yes. I don't know where I would go on the other side of it. I think that, Penn State's hard for me to go all the way in after, I think Aller's got talent, but you keep waiting for the moment where you're like, okay, that was a clutch play or whatever. And I don't know. Right now, I would say Texas. If I had to pull
maybe the Oregon
one out
game.
Of there,
maybe Aller had enough in the Oregon game to build on because he had. I mean, that 4th and 10, he finally, Yeah, look, it's April. I shouldn't have done that to you, but I'm always interested.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not sold on what Georgia's quarterback is. I like LSU's quarterback. I think Nussmeier is really good, and they've upgraded the roster around him. But right now, I don't have a great feel for who the other team is. I worry that Ohio State lost a little too much. I think they'll still be a playoff team, but the one team I feel really confident in is Texas. Based on what I've heard, I talked to a bunch of Texas guys over the last couple of weeks, and it seems like things are going in a really good direction. But I don't know. I don't know where we turn from this. Maybe Clemson.
I might go down to Clemson for the opener.
Hey, Klubnik looked good against Texas in that game. He stepped up, and so in the playoff game, I don't know. People are obviously really down on Dabo, but I think they've got enough talent. I wouldn't be surprised if they were a team that made it into the Final Four at least.
Yeah, well, why not? I think last year for Clemson was a nice little reminder that this is sort of the standard. It's what it should be. Granted, not to the level of what it was when they were going back and forth against Bama all those years, but
because they missed on receivers. Before they had you started with Hopkins, you go down that list of dudes they had. Renfro. They had a lot of really good receivers. T. Higgins. Then they hit on some national guys who didn't turn out to be so good, and because he doesn't do anything with the portal, he couldn't replenish it the way It's not like Nick Saban when your receiver room gets thin, all of a sudden you grab like Jamison Williams from Ohio State, and he turns out to be elite. I think that's the issue. Was Clemson was not where they missed in recruiting. They did. Dabo was not willing to pivot.
Yeah, but getting Wesco in there, like you're right. Like there was a bit of a gap. It's always we've talked about this a lot over the years, but there's certain schools where like, how do they not have like one guy on the outside who just scares the shit out of you? Like how do they not? Okay, you have a bad year or whatever, but there's certain programs I just never expect them to have multiple years without somebody. So I think it's pretty clear after Wesco's freshman year that they have a guy. All right, man.
I mean, look at just one thing on that. Look at what Ohio State did. Their receiver room is ridiculous. They have the best player in college football who's going to be there for 2 more years. But Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator there. He had a receiver, Michael Sturdivant, who transferred from Cal to UCLA, legit track guy, 6'2", 6'3", looks like an NFL, guy. He probably would have been like the 5th or 6th receiver at Ohio State. That's how deep they were, and I just think now he'll go to Florida and probably be like the number 2 or 3 guy or 3 guy. But I just think that if you're not in that game where you're not constantly stocking, and making that room as competitive as can be, especially that room, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And, hopefully for Clemson's sake, they've remedied that.
You can check out the entire mock draft on The Athletic, and we'll catch up with Bruce again, man, getting ready for college football, which is, a little later on the to-do list. So thanks.
Always a pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
The Ryen Russillo podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the final stretch of the NBA season, and the playoff picture is changing by the minute. Every three-pointer or fourth quarter comeback means that much more. And with live betting on FanDuel, you can make the playoff picture a little prettier. So whether you're looking to ride with a hot shooter or think a team is due for a run, you can get in on the action until the final buzzer with America's #1 sportsbook. We're going to try to do something a little different. Embrace the tank. So 3-legger here. We've got Alexander Sarr. 15 points or more. This is what we're looking at. He's minus 146. Sarr has not played against Orlando, I believe. So this time it's personal. Quentin Grimes is minus 900. So he threw him in there because Grimes is, Philly, when they tanked, they're like, we shouldn't have traded for this guy. And then Keon Johnson, who's getting some shots up. My man has put up 20, 19 in his most recent game. I'm talking field goal attempts. He scored 13, 15, and 24. Had 24 in that win against Dallas. So, yeah, Keon getting the most out of his minutes. And now he's playing like 30 minutes a game for the most part, for the last 5, around 30 minutes. So that's what we're doing. 15 points or more for Sarr, Grimes, Johnson. That would pay out at plus 358. We're excited about this. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $200 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com/Ryen, RYEN, to join today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Let's go back to Tales from the Couch on a Thursday. Couple games, couple thoughts from last night. So I know this seems to happen a lot, but Oklahoma City was on television last night. I was kind of curious, and then I was like, I guess I'm not, because Cade is out, Big Stu is out, Ron Holland's out, Sasser's out. So Detroit outmanned a bit here in the first quarter. Their defense was a mess. SGA basically just got any defender off of him, got wherever he wanted. Thunder had 26 points in the first quarter, just 26 points in the paint, 41 in the quarter. And then Chet just had a bunch of really great Chet moments because they started him in this one. They were kind of changing around the double big rotation and when they wanted to do it. He had one play where he just straight up raced Duren down the court, beat him for the lob. Then he had another play where he grabbed the rebound, dribbled it coast to coast, got the and one finish. It was really interesting, too, because he went the entire right sideline with Jalen on him, and he kind of kept his left arm in. I don't know what he was doing as opposed to the off-arm stuff that's happening in the NBA. There are certain guys that were criminal with it, but now it feels like everybody just kind of gets away with it all the time. Not doing a rant on it. I'm just noticing it a ton. And then the offensive player, after he hands out this forearm shiver to the defensive player and then doesn't get a call consistently, just accountability, guys. If you're going to murder somebody's ribs and then don't get a call on some slight contact at the top, think, hey, maybe I could have gotten an offensive foul. So let's just be happy with neutral. But that's not the way it goes when you're out there competing. And then there was another play where he went against Duren and basically Jalen cut off his drive because he's bigger and he's stronger. And then Chet it looks like he's about to get stuck. And then Wallace makes a great back cut because Detroit wasn't paying attention to anything that was happening off the ball. It's like, hey, Detroit, guess what? When you play the Thunder, guys are going to keep moving on offense. They're going to keep cutting. All the guys can pass. And when you're on offense, if you just dick around at the elbow holding the basketball, you're probably going to end up turning it over. So just some really good stuff from Chet. One play in particular that I want to get to, it wasn't super complicated, but speaks to the multiple options you have with this team on offense. They really are completely comfortable with Hartenstein having the basketball. Here he is in this play. He's beyond the three-point line on the right side. All right, so now he's bringing the only big that Detroit has. And even when Duren was in there, they were struggling to do anything in the paint. And so now you're pulling him like 27 feet away from the basket. And on the left block, I shouldn't say left block, left elbow, Chet's setting kind of a back screen for a perimeter player to cut around it. But then there's a second movement where then Chet can read the paint. And he's also facing Isaiah. Isaiah's just standing, like it almost looks at times like, why would you want the center just waiting and holding the ball? And, could somebody come up and harass him? And it's like, no, he's fine because he's such a good passer. And he's going to see over the top of basically any defender that's out on him. And so the first part of it gets cut off and Detroit loses all sense of defensive concept. And then Chet just facing Hartenstein cuts right into the paint, gets the pass, finishes the dunk. No one even at the rim. Just beautiful, really simple stuff that starts with a back cut on the opposite side of the floor. So they ran the same play a few possessions later, and Tobias Harris, vet awareness, knew what was coming, right? They started it a little bit different, so maybe it looks a little different to the defense. You'll see teams do that where it's like, okay, there's something here we like. Let's see if it's going to work again, but let's get into it a little bit different so that maybe it's not as predictable. So Hartenstein's all the way past the three-point line, maybe a little bit closer on this time around. Chet sets the screen. Chet's looking, and Harris knew it was coming. So Chet basically gets cut off by Harris because Harris is aware of it. So now all of this stuff is different. There's even a version of this where the original first perimeter cutter is setting then a screen off of it. He shut off, and then somebody's curling up. It's almost like a pin down, but it's way out. And on the second attempt where it looks like, hey, Detroit, Harris knew what was happening. Smart guy. Hey, we just got beat on this, like bad. I'm going to play it this way. Chet can't move. He's stuck. And then Jalen Williams just comes up from the corner, grabs the ball, creates on his own, hits a step back jumper. It's just ridiculous. And look, the crazy thing about this game, as bad as it looked in the beginning and as limited as Detroit's options were for the rotation with the injuries and suspensions in this game, they got back into it because Tim Hardaway had a huge first half, hit a bunch of threes. At one point it was like 63-59, and I'm going, how is this happening? And then the third quarter, they go off. Like SGA sat like 7 game minutes in the first half. They didn't bring them back until 6:25 in the fourth. So I don't think the Thunder at any point last night were all that concerned with what was going on. And as you see with this closing group, where it'll be Dort, it'll be Williams, it'll be SGA, and I think they like the double big part of it. But if they don't, they'll probably play Wallace, who may give a second option to Hunt, because SGA is going to get hunted just because it's a better thing to hunt than some of the other guys. I mean, Jalen Williams' defense consistently, especially the stuff even at the rim for him, always seems to be really impressive. I believe his 4th game back after the injury. But when Dort's your 5th option offensively, they didn't have Caruso last night. So a lot to like here. So just to put it into perspective where the Thunder are at with this winning streak, they now have a 13.4 point differential on the season. That is number 1 all time by a full point over the Lakers from 71-72. It's 2 points better than the Celtics last season, who at the time were 5th all time, now 6th with this season from the Thunder. Thunder sitting there at 64-12. I guess they could win their last 6. I don't know that they're going to try enough to do that to get to 70. Remember, 70 wins is no longer cool because Golden State blew a 3-1 lead. OKC is 28-8 against teams that are 500 or better. So that's a 78% winning percentage against those teams. Boston last year was 34-15, so more games, but a 69% winning percentage. They are 29-1 against the East. Granted, feels like half the East is tanking, even some of the teams that are in the play-in. There was a thought that I had last night. Did the Thunder win the championship last night because Big Stu was not available to murder Chet Holmgren? Discuss. An aside here, as we go back to a couple days ago, I think one of the most surprising parts of the season was when Steph, late in the game where he went crazy against Memphis, and it was just one of those, if you love Steph, you're like, hey, I'm going to watch this full game. Because I was on the phone with somebody, it was on in the background, and I was seeing what was happening. I'm like, I got to get off the phone because now I want to go back and watch the full Steph experience against Memphis, because it actually turned out to be a pretty good game. But towards the end, there was a play where it was Santi Aldama and Desmond Bane on Steph to the sideline, like over right by like where the coach would be standing. And they were roughing Steph up a bit just to try to they were down. They were going to lose the game, but it was like, hey, close out, but fine, be super aggressive. And Steph was like, all right, whistle blows. Steph goes to shoot a shot. Desmond Bane slaps it down. And Steph kind of starts going at it with Bane a little bit. And then Aldama's in there. And then Draymond comes over. And I'm like, oh, my God. Draymond Green's about to choke out Santi Aldama. I think Aldama checks a lot of Draymond boxes. But he didn't. He didn't choke him out. Santi's like, dude, I'm good. I'm fine. I know on Sunday, on the Sunday pod with Bill, we had Chris Vernon on with us. Passionate Memphis resident and a guy who I really think is a good guy and really talented. And I like Verno. So I knew it was going to be kind of a tough pod because I'd had these Memphis thoughts for a little while. And he makes a great point. Like, hey, 2 seed 2 or 3 years ago, 2 seed 2 years ago, bad year last year. It's only one bad year. And before all of the injuries, they were 2 seed again. It's like, yeah, that's actually really good. But I think all of us that watch regularly, it's like, am I ever really thinking of them as that team? Would I not want to play them in the playoffs with how the West is stacked up right now? Or would I be going, I really want to play Memphis? I think more teams would rather play Memphis. I don't know if there's going to be some weird seeding stuff that would happen the last couple of days where teams would be like, hey, if we lose tonight, then we know that we're going to get Memphis in the first round as they try to figure it all out. But I knew that it was going to be me being harsh on Ja, and I didn't really look forward to it. Definitely, I think where I'm at with the job, like you don't want to make it seem, I mean, that's always kind of the number one rule when you're on the air is that you don't want to really make it personal. But then sometimes I just can't. Like most of the times when I share something with you, it's after multiple examples to kind of reinforce my feelings about it. And what I had said on Sunday was really more probably about Ja than this Memphis group in general. It's like, man, they get real high on themselves in moments that don't make a ton of sense. And I referenced the whoop that trick game where they were down 3-1 in the series to Golden State. They destroy Golden State. Place is going nuts. I'm sure it was a lot of fun in the building, probably a great memory. Ja didn't play. And then game 6, they get destroyed. And you're like, should you be a team? Who am I to sit here and say, hey, don't enjoy that much? Because that was a super enjoyable night. That was a very chippy series. And it's just these teams definitely don't seem to like each other very much, which is good. Like, that's fun for all of us, right? But yeah, I guess there's certain players and certain teams at a time where I'll go like, I don't know if that's really the guy, despite the early resume for Ja, being incredible, MVP voting. And I don't mean the sneaker deal is like, that's a defining thing, but it's kind of like a defining thing. Like when you get that deal with Nike and it's like, all right, you get a chance to be like a dude, like a real guy in this league. And I know the injuries have played a big part of it, but all of those concerns that I'd had about Ja that I shared on the pod on Sunday were reinforced in that game. He's been great the last two games, which is automatic that I would be critical, and then he would just light it up for two nights. 31 a game, 32 a game. 31 a game the last two games. Shot it really well against Golden State, not a pun. But in that game, he had what was the game-losing non-box out against Podziemski, where he just loses him, and that was kind of the game, and then comes down, turnover, and then he gets into the Golden State bench, which is now being investigated, where he looked like he was pretending to shoot an AR-15 at him. Sure, like Ja's is going to be, because of everything he's gone through, like people are not going to give him as much leeway with some of this shit. That's just kind of the way life works. And then he tweets out like, oh, Ja this, Ja that. And that's the part where I'm like, yeah, there's kind of like no accountability. Everything that he went through, I wasn't outraged. I wasn't super mad about it. Really, I thought the punishment was excessive. But what scared me more was the way he had talked about it afterwards. And then in that game, in these big, big moments, despite the scoring, it's like, you're not doing the little shit that you need to do to win. And now you've added this other layer of just stupidness that I don't quite understand. Houston. So Houston is 13-2 in their last 15. I watched the Lakers game on Monday, and I wanted to watch specifically because this Rockets thing in its entirety is really strange as I try to figure out, like, what am I going to fall for in the West when I try to pick these series? Houston, I tracked it from like 5 minutes on in the fourth quarter. I was like, I want to see how many shots I like and how many shots I don't like. So in those possessions from maybe it was like 5:40 left, I forget when it was, but they're going back and forth to the Lakers. And from that point, I started keeping track of it. I counted 5 bad/tough shots, 3 turnovers, 1 good field goal attempt that I liked. And I'd say I should add a second good field goal attempt because it led to free throws. So let's call it 2. So out of those 10 that I looked at to close out the game when it mattered, right? There was 2 good looks. And so we've talked about their clutch offensive numbers, and you're like, they're just not very good, except for the fact that the weirdest thing about the Rockets is then you guessed it, they have the most clutch wins in the NBA. They've also played the most clutch games, 44 this season, tied for most in the NBA with Minnesota. And I had mentioned on Sunday's pod that with Ime, you never quite know what you're going to get with that closing group. Like, we generally know what Houston Rockets want to do because they're sitting there at the 2 seed, and it looks like they're going to be the 2 seed because of this great stretch they've been on. And, part of it too is that it's been a much lighter stretch of the schedule, but they're beating everybody. So I don't really want to make this about focusing on the rare loss in this group, but I'd say, Ime will do anything. You never know what he's going to do. And he benched Jalen Green basically for the last 5+ minutes of this stretch. Brought him back in 11 seconds to go down 4. So it was just to try to see if they could get any kind of offensive possession. Then you dig through all the stuff that Houston has on the net rating group for the clutch minutes for this season, which is kind of a big sample when it's 44 games. But Amen Thompson has the worst net, like by a wide margin of any of the regulars. His defensive numbers, ironically, his defensive efficiency is 20 points worse than Şengün, who is off the charts in his net rating for the clutch stuff. So there's just some times where I look at something and be like, hey, I do not like the offense. They seem to win enough. It's not that big of a deal. The players that we do seem to like are the guys that have some of the bad numbers. And Şengün, who you wonder defensively how it would hold up, like closing in a 5-minute stretch in the playoffs. Well, the numbers tell you it's actually been awesome, even though I think all of us would kind of like go, I don't know. That seems generally misleading. I don't know what to do with any of that stuff. Last night, as I was switching around, I noticed that Atlanta got back in the game with Dallas. let's admit, Atlanta, Dallas, probably off my radar at this point. But I was like, man, Atlanta got back in it. AD is going off. What is Dallas's closing group going to look like here? Can Dinwiddie give you enough offense with a healthy AD to be kind of a scary play-in team? And look, they're going to be in the play-in. It looks like it, right? Atlanta's going to be in the play-in. Here we go, Hawks. But yeah, guilty pleasure. The game was already over, so I knew what the score was because I knew it was close. I was like, do you want to watch the shots Trae Young took? Like, I bet you there's a good one in there. I bet you. And then I was like, don't do that. And then the inner dialogue was like, you want to watch it. You want to see one of those shots. You can't help it. And I can't help it. I went back and watched it. And I'll leave it for the audience if you want to go back, which almost none of you should do because you have lives. I was not disappointed. AD, the game-winning shot, granted they're calling it a walk-off all the time now when there's no time left. I know it's been mentioned before. I don't know that I love it. But then AD, an incredible contest on Trae Young with 3 seconds left down two, trying to get a three off and really had no chance. I think his foot was actually going to be over the line anyway. But the shot that I'm really talking about was a shot a little bit earlier in the game. Trae was, as that team got back in it, it was a lot like a Congo. There was a lot of stuff where he was actually deferring, so it wasn't like he was even going nuts there necessarily towards the end. But when you start looking at that play-in stuff, you go, would Dallas have enough? Because now they get all their centers back. They got them all back, right? All at once, but no Kyrie. Is there anything in there? They have no Luka, too. I don't know if you guys knew that. So, yeah, I went back and watched because I just couldn't help myself. It was a bit like the Harden Pistons game, where I have to go into a different feed to watch Clippers games here in Los Angeles. And Harden had taken 20 free throws against Detroit. And I was like, do you want to watch that? Like, you don't. It's like, but I kind of do. Like, don't watch it. You're just going to get mad, right? I was like, yeah, but sometimes I like getting mad. And so I watched it. And mad I did get. Hunter Tyson had 20 shots in an NBA game last night, in case you were wondering. So game of the year, Minnesota, the double overtime win at Denver. Here's the tease. Can you call yourself a good parent if you don't make your kid watch it? We're going to have a lot more on that game later on the pod. We have Jon Krawczynski, who covers the Timberwolves for The Athletic, joining us. I know, look, I don't tape on Wednesdays. I didn't get to bask in the afterglow of perhaps the best game of the entire season. Minnesota winning at Denver in double overtime. You were in the building. Where would you put that, John, on the great games you've ever seen?
Yeah, I mean, regular season wise, especially right up there, man. And I've covered this team 21 years now, and you just think about all the twists and turns. I mean, I thought that thing was lost and won 7 different times. Jokic is the most insane player I've ever seen, with one of the most insane performances I've ever seen, not coming off the floor for the last 40 minutes of the game, if you include the halftime. And then you have Ant going crazy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker doing his thing, and Russell Westbrook doing his thing in the worst of ways. It was the emotional twists and turns were insane the whole way. It was amazing.
Look, there's certainly some lineup maintenance that we have to offer in here as Minnesota goes 4-0 against Denver during the regular season. But in this game, there's no Murray. Michael Porter Jr. was out for personal reasons, but then on the suspension side after the fight with Detroit, no Naz Reid, no DiVincenzo. So that's part of it. But look, when it was 14-2 to start, it felt like even without their pieces, Denver was like, this game matters, because I thought the game where Minnesota beat them by 20, I was looking forward to that game weeks ago, maybe it was over a month ago now, where it was like, oh, okay, I can't wait to watch this. And Minnesota puts it on them pretty good. And he's like, hey, despite the disappointment from where Minnesota was, 56 wins last year, this sort of first half malaise, just based on the expectations for who they could be. Going into this year, could this team win a title? They weren't playing to that standard. And then when they beat Denver like that, I'm like, there's a very short list of teams that could go in there. We could talk schedule. We could get into, just the randomness of certain nights. But that game felt like it mattered And so then I felt like Denver was responding based on what that game was. So 14-2, I was like, okay, they poked him enough. They've woken up. And then to lose it again, is there something that you feel that you've seen or coaches have shared with you for why this matchup has gone Minnesota's way, including the elimination of the playoffs last year?
Yeah, I would say this, and this is what I think made it different for the last game versus the other three and the five total, including the playoffs that came before it. There are times watching this Timberwolves team where you just know there are certain matchups that they get up for. I think they've been really maddening, especially this year, because they will look really good against teams and then they will play Washington, Utah, one of these lower teams and just really look terrible. But Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels love to play against Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Like, for whatever reason, when they see those guys in front of them, we're coming after you. And it's Devin Booker is another one of their favorite guys to torment. And they have their way with Phoenix all of the time. But when you have the two 23, 24-year-olds that are, really engaged and set the tone defensively, including offensively as well, the Wolves are just different. And there are times when Jaden McDaniels looks a little bored out there with some matchups. There are times when Anthony Edwards isn't making the right decisions, isn't locked all the way in. But against Denver, they want to get in there and take them apart piece by piece. And a lot of the times they do. And that's what made the last game kind of more impressive to me, even though Murray and Porter were out. Those are usually the guys that really kind of stoke the fire. And for the Wolves to overcome that and play the way they did and win that game, even without that internal motivation that they usually have, that said something to me, because I see a different look in Anthony Edwards' eyes when he has Jamal Murray in front of him. And I see a different look in Jaden McDaniels' eyes when he is saying, I'm going to take Michael Porter Jr. out of this game and out of this league. And that's what happens. And then Jokic can get as many points as he wants. And if the other guys are not hurting them, the Wolves are usually in pretty good shape that way.
Jokic did get the points a couple nights ago, 61, 10, and 10. He knew. By the way, when he gets Rudy, because remember last year with Cat, it was Cat on Jokic, and then they would let Rudy sort of freelance off of Gordon, even though depending on the substitution patterns, like Gobert would end up with Jokic at times. Now with this, and especially with no Nas, Jokic's eyes light up. Like there's something about him with Gobert where he's more aggressive. And they needed him, obviously, with Murray and the scoring from those two guys and Porter Jr. not being out there. But what I did like about this, and it's easier after you win double overtime on the road when it looks like you're going to lose the game, but the reverence that so many of the guys on the Timberwolves had for Jokic, you're in the locker room. Share with us a couple of the stories, because I couldn't stop watching the videos because it just felt so genuine from all your guys.
Yeah, I wrote about it at The Athletic because I swear to you, Ryan, I've been in locker rooms for 20 plus years, and I have never seen such reverence, such respect doled out from the opposing team to an opposing player as we saw after 61, 10, and 10 against them on the other night. Julius Randle sat in his locker room, in front of his locker, and I went up to him and I just said, how does your body feel after going to war with that big dude for 50 minutes? And he said, I feel terrible. My body feels awful. It is a 15-round fight the whole way. And he said, I don't know what to do with him. He said he does these turnaround fadeaways off one leg, and his touch to get the ball onto the rim at any angle as soft as possible is impossible. He just said it, and his eyes were wide. And this is a multi-time All-Star, former face of the franchise in New York. This isn't some scrub who is in awe of a star. This is a well-established 11-year vet who is saying this. And then we went over to Anthony Edwards, and I am telling you, Ryan, Anthony Edwards never gives flowers to anyone besides Kevin Durant. He is just this super prideful guy. He was quoted in the Netflix documentary saying, I don't look up to anyone in the league ever. And that's his mentality. He was once at a Nike event when he was in high school, and there was a bunch of stars around, and he sat in the corner, and someone went up to him and said, Ant, why don't you go talk to some of these players and kind of soak up a little bit of this? And Ant's like, man, I don't got time for this. I mean, he told Barack Obama to stand down. And like, I mean, this guy does not get flattered by anything, doesn't get an eye. And we talked to him, and the first things out of his mouth were, Nikola Jokic, bruh, oh my God. And like, he went on for a minute just talking about how good Jokic is, how impossible it is to stop him, and just the sheer insanity of his skill level and what it's like to try and figure him out. And it really struck me in that locker room that you just never hear players, especially these guys, talk with that kind of respect and reverence for another person. And they could not stop gushing about Nikola Jokic.
I love this game from Ant as well. The slow start, and then the shot making, the sense of urgency, that drive that he had on the left side where it looked like he took off before any defender thought that he would take off. This is why those of us that love him, okay? Because it's aesthetically pleasing on top of everything else. And I think the good part for Ant is that there's at least a deep playoff run in there too early on the resume, because we know how it works. If you start getting bounced first, second round all the time, even though there's some players that I would hold that against other players, I'd be like, I think it's based more on the situation. But this is a team that started 32-29. They're 12-3 in their last 15. They'd be 14-1 in their last 15 if Obi Toppin wasn't in the league, perhaps.
That's right.
Just watching those games, I'm like, you could say, hey, how come Minnesota's not beating the Pacers? These games are really important. Well, the Pacers are playing just really good basketball for a while, and Toppin went crazy and that stuff too. So I guess there's like a bigger part of this where, it's the post-Cat, where I understood the Cat trade, and then it just looks bad. Right. And he's lighting it up for New York, but it's like, yeah, but he still kind of has the same limitations. So the limitations they saw, there's the Randall component where it's been better now, but I'm always going to be worried about it. It's nice to see DiVincenzo finally hitting these shots. So where is this team? Because they're not going to obviously catch the record of last year, and we're not going to maybe have the same anticipation based on the regular season, but how do you see it, man? You're around them all the time and trying to figure out what is possible for them in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I remember, Ryan, right after the trade, kind of, I even hit you up kind of on the side, and we're just kind of talking through things a little bit. And the immediate messaging, both publicly and privately, from the Timberwolves after the Cat trade was, this is a long-term play to give us the flexibility that we need to build around Anthony Edwards, to get out of that second apron eventually, to open up some more team building mechanisms that the CBA prevents us from having when we're in that apron. And with Karl Anthony Towns' contract, that was going to be almost really difficult to do, and still put a good team around Ant. And so there was the larger picture of long-term planning, making sure everything is sustainable going forward for the next 4 or 5 years. But also there was a belief internally that with this trade, getting Randall and DiVincenzo for Towns, they thought that they might be a little more versatile going into the playoffs, matchup wise. Maybe they're a little tougher, and maybe they actually do have a chance to, in the immediate future, still be as successful as the team that went to the Western Conference Finals. And I think early on, it certainly wasn't there. And one of the biggest reasons is when you talk to people about the process of learning to play with Rudy Gobert, that is a different kind of animal, a different kind of teammate to learn, to figure out, to understand than your average big man in the paint. He just does things differently. He operates differently offensively. He has more idiosyncrasies you have to learn to figure out. Mike Conley's told me it took him a full year in Utah before he really understood the best ways to work with him, where he wants the ball, all of these different things. And I do think in the early first couple of months, DiVincenzo and Randall were struggling to figure out how to play with Rudy. I think Rudy, who at Karl Anthony Towns was as open to playing with Rudy as anybody on last year's team and was really helpful for Gobert and getting kind of acclimated. With him gone, I think Rudy had to adjust to these new guys, and they did not look good. The offense was terrible. The defense was slow. But I think slowly over the course of the last several months, they have found their rhythm together. They are operating on a string defensively a lot better. It's not what it was last year, but it's still much better. Rudy is starting to get involved in the offense with, Julius Randle giving him little lob passes, Dante DiVincenzo finding him and just giving him enough touches so that he is engaged on the other end of the court at a much higher level. And then finally, the other piece that I think is really important to their success is since January 1st, they have the fifth best offense and the fourth best net rating. And one of the reasons Mike Conley is not looking like the washed up player that he looked like early on. He's shooting the ball great. He's playing much better defensively. He is the adult in the room for them, and he has been terrific in March, and he started turning around in February. And that's just so big for a team that doesn't make really good decisions a lot of the times. To have a quarterback and a reliable guy at point guard has really solidified. And so now they look like a team that if they get the right matchups, things go their way, they could win a round or two. They could. I really believe that. They could also lose two in the play-in and be done with this. That's just been how frenetic and Jekyll and Hyde they've been.
That would be really disappointing.
Oh, it'd be a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the standings as of now, which could change in 5 minutes, I'm kidding a little bit, but they're probably not catching the Lakers in the 3 seed or Denver in the 4. I mean, they're 2.5 back. It's not impossible. The schedule closes with 6 games against Brooklyn, Philly, Milwaukee, Memphis, Brooklyn again, and Utah. So certainly not the hardest schedule. But when I was looking at this morning before I was going to talk to you, it's like, look, 5 to 8 are in play because they have the same record as the Clippers and Memphis at 44 and 32, but they have the tiebreaker. So again, they're sitting there at the 6th seed. What I like is I don't want to sit here and constantly be like, hey, matchup to matchup, but I want to do it with you because you've been around him so long, and then kind of pivot that into rotational stuff. Because when Conley was bad, I felt like, okay, this is kind of 2 guys you can ignore when he and Rudy are out there offensively. And I don't know that I don't know that works anymore at all. Okay, it used to work. I would be really reluctant if I'm Finch to go, can I close with those 2 guys? Like DiVincenzo, the best version of him feels like a closing option. Jaden, I know it's kind of hit or miss, but I felt better about his offense. It feels like Randall would be in that group. But then if you go, okay, say it's 3-6 and it ends up being the Lakers, would they want to go small and play Nas, knowing that the Lakers' preference, I think, is going to be to close with Rui, and you might be playing into their hands. But at the same time, we've seen this small, big thing kind of burn Rudy at times in playoff series in the past. That one to me is like, I think Finch is probably the kind of guy who would say, hey, it's all on the table. And then by game 4, he's made the decision.
Yeah, I think so. What we've seen from Finch so far this season is that there have been times where he has closed with Rudy on the bench. There's been times he's closed with Randall on the bench, with Conley on the bench. There are no sacred cows with him. I think there's been a little frustration within the fan base, especially in the first couple of months, that he kind of really stuck to an 8-man rotation and didn't really maybe incorporate Shannon or Dillingham or a few of these other guys a little bit more just to try and get them some run and see if they brought a different dimension. But when it comes to closing time, when you're leaning on your dudes, he has proven to be pretty versatile and pretty elastic with what the game requires. What would be interesting in a Lakers series is, even though when they go small, they kind of play big. And I would worry about how the Wolves would close possessions in terms of getting rebounds. They are kind of vulnerable to offensive rebounds, especially when Rudy is off of the floor. And the other part of a Lakers matchup is that Luka Doncic is one of the very few players in the league that isn't bothered one bit by Jaden McDaniels. And so how they defend that part of the equation would be a concern. But I do think that overall, to your point, in a playoff series, Chris Finch will eventually, I would say even by game 3, would say, all right, I'm going to give my best guys the chance. And if that's not working, I'm changing things up. He famously sat D'Angelo Russell against Memphis a few years ago. And so he has proven to show that he'll do what it takes. And that might mean some hurt feelings every once in a while and managing things, but they got to win games. And that's what he's made the priority.
I watched the Detroit game on the broadcast with Mike and Jim because I have like a hierarchy of broadcast partners where I go like, okay, well, it's my favorite part about the night for League Pass. I'll be like, okay. And then sometimes it's close. I'll be like, because maybe they're 4 seed matchups. And I'll be like, who do I want to go with? Jim wins it a lot. So during the Detroit fight, they're watching it all back. Everyone in Detroit was to blame. And then I watched the NBA TV post game and Isaiah Thomas was on it and he blamed everybody from Minnesota. I know that it started with the Stewart DiVincenzo thing and then it amplified again because DiVincenzo just got shoved by Stewart while he was on the ground after he ran into Fontecchio. And then Holland's back on the other end. He scores on Nas. I thought Nas overreacted on the foul on Holland. And then I think DiVincenzo was still pissed about being shoved. So then he was going to get involved. And then it just turns into this whole thing. Is there anything from that game, considering the way it started, is there anything from that game where it's like a huge positive for Minnesota the rest of the way? Can that be a rallying moment?
Yeah, I really think it was, Ryan. When you look at how that game was going, Detroit was handling the Wolves. It was 34-20 after the first quarter, and they were doing what the Pistons do to their credit. I mean, they were physical. They were pushing people around. They were the aggressors in every sense of the word in that first quarter. And you could tell when Dante DiVincenzo came into the game that he saw that his teammates were getting bullied and said, I'm going to stand up here. And, somebody's got to follow me into this fight. And so what happened was as soon as he hit the floor, he started ramping up the physicality and he went right at Isaiah Stewart. I mean, it's like, what they say, in prison, go at the biggest guy first and see what happens. And that's exactly what Dante did. And I think a few possessions into that, I think that everyone in the arena and certainly everyone on the Wolves bench understood that this was about to pop off if the officials did not really crack down, and they didn't. And so Dante took it upon himself to say, look, man, we are not getting punked here in our own building. And do I think he maybe overreacted a little bit? He absolutely ramped that up from a skirmish into like a potentially dangerous situation going into the stands the way that he did. But after the game, the Wolves really did respond well to it and felt like, hey, here was one of our guys, one of our new faces that was going to bat for us. And we came back and got the energy and took the game that they needed. But also, I think that there's more of a togetherness now even than before. I think they needed to have some kind of a scrap there. And, one thing that this team was missing early on in the season, Ryan, was Kyle Anderson. And not necessarily from a play standpoint, although they did miss that, but he was like the resident asshole in the locker room.
I'm going to give you that because it is always like he is sneaky, way nastier out there because the way he carries himself, it's the way he moves. But I'm glad you brought that up because I was watching him last night from Miami and he was getting pissed off about something. And I was like, that's so funny that like Kyle actually will like get way more fired up than you think because he does it in a reserved way.
Totally. And he's a Jersey guy. And even so it's both on the court, but also in the locker room too. When they were, whenever last year's team was not doing what it was supposed to be doing, it was Kyle Anderson getting in people's faces, being a little ornery and being like, look, we got to knock this stuff off and get back and start, put our big boy pants on and get out there and do it. And so they missed that presence in the locker room. And I think Dante is stepping into that role a little bit as sort of the fiery, ornery dude that is going to maybe tell some truths, maybe, ruffle some feathers. But then when you're out on the court, he is fighting for you. And I think they need some of that edge. And that was a big productive moment for them, was kind of responding. And then not only, getting into the fight and doing that. And he came to Nas's aid and there was a point in that scrum where he like threw Stewart off of him and pushed like 5 people back while his back was against the wall. And that's a visceral reaction that they really reacted to. And I think that will carry well, going forward and into the playoffs if things get heated.
Thanks for the perspective on the Denver double overtime win. And I can't wait, man. So we'll probably have you on in the playoffs. All right.
Anytime. Thanks, man.
Jon Krawczynski, The Athletic.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address to submit questions to improve your life. lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. Kyle, Ceruti, Wargon. Wargon, I feel like we should have asked you about running with your shirt off.
Totally. A huge miss.
No, that's on me. I'm the leader. I'm the host.
Yeah, I'm a shirt on runner. I don't know if I have the physique yet. Give me a couple months.
But you're not ruling it out.
No, I guess I'm not ruling it out.
Right.
One day, goals.
Right.
Were you dying when we were talking about it just 48 hours ago, being like, guys, I'm right here?
I thought about just ripping it off and just unmuting
Turning
the camera
on for a second.
Yeah.
That would have been the best thing you could have possibly done.
Maybe there's a bet where the loser has to do the show with their shirt off.
Fuck, that would be the worst. That would be the worst.
That would be tough. There's talks of you running a 40, Ryan, at this McShay thing that's going on at your house. And
I keep hearing about this McShay thing, and I'm like, how much is Ryan clued in? How much does he have a vote on?
I said yes to something like a month ago, and now I keep hearing versions of it where now I don't want to do it. I'll be totally honest.
I think everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Have you heard the 40 thing yet? Have you heard because I saw people debating whether or not you could run, sub
a sub
6.
5, a sub 6. Give me a break. Although I do have to have an MRI on my knee because something keeps snapping. So.
There we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Because I was thinking, like, would Wargon actually
accurate
run the
medical
fastest
information?
40?
We'll do it in the sand. How about that? We'll do it in the sand.
Yeah. But I was thinking, would Wargon actually run the fastest 40 if anyone on the pod?
No.
He is a runner. No?
More of a distance guy,
Yeah, Wargon's backing me up. By the way, I don't even know. I am fast. The other day I outran a black pepper snake. No, I think the shirt off thing would be just something we have to ask Wargon about in the future. And so I think, can there be like a Wargon alert? Hey guys,
doing
like
it.
A sound.
Today's the day.
Could you, Wargon, give me a 3, 2, 1. Hey guys.
Oh boy. 3, 2, 1. Hey guys.
God,
even better than Ryan could have imagined.
He fucking nails it every time. You're a gift. I don't even think you're real. All right. So look, if we have another running query, we'll make sure we get that. If we could edit in that sound effect for when Wargon talks to us at all, that would be a nice gift to me. I guess Wargon would actually have to do it.
I'll be the one editing it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we end with the pod. We end it today with that, the first installment, because we used to have the Harden I am the system, and then it just kind of went away, right? Was there a production?
Yeah.
Was there an editorial decision on that? Was it just time, Ceruti, to move on?
I think we just decided. How many shows was that Wargon? I was probably.
I was going to say, I think we just started like switching producers around, then it got lost.
That's what I think happened.
Yeah, you had like a 3-man weave going on for a while.
Communication wasn't great then.
Guys were making their own editorial decisions. There's nothing behind it other than, we had like 3 different people cutting the pod. So, that's fine. But why don't we end with Wargon, and we do it in a bunch of pods, not just today. That would please me greatly. All right.
Done. Yeah.
Then we can have some nerds email in a week being like, you definitely can't run a sub 6. All right. We did get some feedback, and I think I said nerds. We had a lawyer on the bonus. Okay.
Probably smart.
Yeah. It was really the best advice I think anybody could hope for, because we got a lot of good advice, right? But this advice was so good that I actually forwarded it to the
guy.
Real life connections. Nice.
Wow.
I think so. Yeah.
So
anyway,
now.
yeah. I mean, if we could actually get people to start dating, but I just don't know that our female woman pool is enough. I mean, we had a guy try to set me up with their friend, which was weird, and she was cute. I don't know if you guys remember that. I don't know, because then we said that she was described in the email as Asian, and then we got some people that didn't like that we had described her that way. But I didn't even describe her that way. That's how it came in. And
just reading copy here. Come on.
Yeah, I'm just reading copy. Thanks, Kyle. And I think on top of that, like not knowing the guys, imagine if it had worked out. Imagine if I had just randomly started dating a girl that dudes had forwarded me her picture through Life Advice, and then it's like on month 7.
You got to come up with a good origin story when they're like, so how'd you guys meet?
Yeah.
You're just like, actually, Tinder sounds way better than what we got.
People around the office are just like, hey, you know who's really happy right now? Russillo. What happened? You met this girl. Life Advice email. Yeah.
You know who's really happy? Or her friends. So like, yeah, is he coming out tonight? Can't wait to ask him about his bracket. Hey, guys. The one that got away, Kyle. All right. So here was I think best. A lot of people sent in really good emails, by the way, so thank you. But I think this kind of covered it all. Finally, a life advice I can help with. I work in payroll for a large company. Can tell you there are a lot of checks and balances in place both before and after pays to prevent these types of issues. Even if you manage to get the actual money in your account, there are dedicated employees in either payroll or accounting auditing accounts after the pay to check for these types of errors. These audits could occur monthly, quarterly, even yearly, so there's no time set. You'll be safe. Dun, dun, dun. The likelihood of someone noticing is high. It's just if they think pursuing it is worth their while or not. Ceruti is correct that within reason, there is no statute of limitations on this money and the company can ask for it back at any time. I've seen my company go back over 2 years to reclaim improper bonuses and pursue repayment even after employee has left the company. Former employees have taken us to court and used the, hey, they gave me the money, it's their mistake excuse, and it doesn't hold water. That being said, if you're going to keep the money, personally, I would keep it. So we have somebody from payroll and accounting with all this information that understands. It says that you should keep it. This guy was keeping it. Who are we kidding? I think you can go about it this way. Typically, you need to pay back the whole bonus or after the tax amount, depending on what year you return the money. See, that's also another factor in this. Talking taxes, but now, who knows? But companies won't come at you for any interest and will most likely let you do a payment plan. I highly recommend that you put this money in some sort of savings account or anything that yields interest, which was Ceruti's point. If no one comes back for it in a couple of years, then it's going to be safer to use. And if they do come back for it, at least you have the interest accrued on the money, even if that is literally pennies on the dollar compared to the bonus itself. If they do ask you to return the money, I'd ask them to set up a payment plan so you could pay back the amount over time, interest-free, and keep as much money in your savings account accruing interest as possible. Most importantly, if you do get caught, don't be a dick to your payroll person. They don't want to do this to you, and it probably wasn't their error to begin with, and they just need to fix it. Plus, they are more likely to set up a favorable repayment schedule if you aren't cursing them out. Well said. And I think based on the way, if you wanted to play it this way, like based on the information that we got from the emailer on Tuesday about how the structure normally plans itself out, like I think there's a high level of being able to play dumb that they can't really call you out on. Be like, last year's bonus was
I'm lacing up my shoes and I'm going hard.
Yeah, right. But yeah, savings account, Ceruti. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just doing a little calculating on the side here. Like, you throw it in a high yield savings account for a year. If they catch you in a year, you make a couple $100.
Apple's doing some nice stuff there, right? You get 4%, right?
I wouldn't even mess with the market, because then
I meant their savings account, right? Don't we read stuff for them?
Credit card, yeah. Whatever you want to do, but you get a decent rate year, you make a couple $100 at worst, and you give it back.
Got to check those interest rates. Apple is great because it just, boom, it's right there. The next thing you know, a couple months later, you look and go, hey, where'd that come from? Look how much fun I'm having now. But, I know the Smoot Hawley stuff, is in the news again. So just stay locked in.
All right. Very good.
It's the best we can tell you. All right. We haven't read any questions yet. Let's get back to questions. Okay. Work hygiene nightmare. Hey guys, gym stats, mostly body weight, upper body workouts, and lower body weight training. Squat 225 for 10 reps. That's some good stuff right there. I have a workplace dilemma that I need help solving, and I figured who better to ask than you three. For context, I work at a large privately held
guys who work
company.
at home. Great.
Yeah. One guy that interacts with no one. How do you meet people? Stop sending emails to Russillo's pod.
Yeah.
I remember what it was like, though. What has he got?
Yeah. All right. So I have a workplace dilemma I need help solving. Ask you guys for context. Large privately held company, 3,000 employees, nearly $4 billion in annual sales. They're not going to miss 15 grand in a bonus. Our corporate office has about 400 employees. Now, here's the issue. I was in the bathroom at the urinal, minding my own business when I heard someone finishing up in the stall next to me, ripping toilet paper, flushing, the whole routine. Out walks my direct boss, who is an executive at our company. And what does he do next? He beelines it straight for the door and leaves. No hesitation, no pit stop, at the sink, no hand washing. Can even do a dampening. I was stunned.
Turn the water on and walk away.
Performance. Come on.
Yeah, like he
no
saw
towels.
you.
Damn, yeah.
Is it an alpha move? Quick departure from the email. Is it an alpha move where he just looks at you and says, yeah, I don't wash my fucking hands.
Not an alpha move at all.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. I was stunned. This man just went number 2 and decided that basic hygiene was optional. I have to work with this guy every day. And now I can't even look at him without feeling immediate disgust. Shortly after, he came by my desk to ask me a work-related question, and I couldn't even make eye contact. Since this was eating me alive, I told a coworker in the office next to mine, and his response made it worse. He's seen this guy pull the same move 3 separate times, he italicized. Yeah. In fact, word has already started spreading on our floor, and people are actively avoiding shaking his hand. Like, we're all fist bumps now, air fist bumps. So what do I do here?
Hit him with the old elbow, the chicken wing.
Do I subtly or not so subtly let him know that people have noticed and this behavior is unacceptable? Do I just accept my fate and stock up on Costco-sized disinfectant wipes for every shared surface? Or do I take it a step further, wait for the next offense? And the second he tries walking out without washing, I call him out in real time. I'm at a loss. This guy has a huge say in my work life, and I don't want to jeopardize anything, but I also don't want to live in constant fear of anything he touches. Well, I can tell you what you probably don't want to do to your direct report is go, hey, wash your hands after you take a dump, buddy.
You maniac. Right.
It sucks so bad because if this guy wasn't a direct, your direct report or whatever, somebody who could influence your career, the office in general could just have this whole understanding that no one's going to shake his hand, and then he'll just kind of be shamed into getting the hint. That to me is the best way. But yeah,
no shakes, Jimmy.
Yeah, everyone's just like, whoa, give me 3 feet, brother. I don't know.
I think this is good because you're not the only one. Like, if this ever gets back to him, you're not the only one who he remembers, this happening to. Because now there's 5 other people.
He doesn't remember.
Oh yeah, this is all over town. Yeah, so it's like if there is some sort of anonymous way, that whether it's a sign or a memo or anything, like this is not a direct line back to you. So if you end up going that route. I wouldn't worry about your future being in jeopardy because it sounds like he's just putting up shots and he has no idea who's, what I mean? So
he doesn't care.
Yeah. Doesn't care. Doesn't know. It's not even a thought for him, which is a positive in this situation.
I have to say, there's probably plenty of people in the world that don't wash their hands. I think we all like to say that we do and we're good people, that we put the shopping cart back. But, when no one's watching, I'm sure there are people, a good percentage of the population that don't. But to the arrogance to do it when multiple people have just been like, yeah, hey, I saw him walk out, just not a hand washer. To do it in front of people is nuts. Is this an HR issue? Is there a Toby in your office that you can just kind of put this on and have him be the bad guy and just say, maybe there's a company-wide email just saying, hey, there's been a lot of word of hygiene and people, there's extra we're putting extra soap in the bathrooms now. Maybe just pass it off on them. And that way, at least there's some sort of it's out there for everyone to know and everyone knows what it's about.
I never know how buttoned up HR is. Are they the commissioner where it's actually I'm here for the owners and it seems like I'm here to help everyone?
Yes, so no. HR, I mean, I'm sorry to the HR people listening, but most of the experience has been oh, wait, you want me to say something that so that you guys like don't like. This isn't really. I mean, look, I don't want to turn this into a fucking HR thing because they're going to get a million emails from
I'm sure.
HR reps saying that we're dicks. But yeah, at bigger corporations, it feels a little bit more like,
hey, we got a problem brewing with this guy down here. Like, it's not like, what can I fix for you? It's more like,
who's more sensitive, HR people or pilots? Find out.
Oh my God.
Pilot lied the other night.
People already don't like me. It's fine.
I turned to Liv, and I was like, he's gonna lie about how long we're gonna be on this tarmac. And then the pilot forgot that he had already lied when he started the announcement. He's like, probably 10 more minutes. And then 30 seconds later, he's like, so about 15 minutes. So he forgot the lie inside. We were on the tarmac for an hour. But again, we've already covered this. We had people
just chopping it up. Yeah.
Is that they never say like, hey, this could be an hour because they lose the audience. It's like stand up. The pilot has to make you think that it's just 10 minutes away. It's just 10 minutes away. I'd rather lie to you 5 times that it's 10 minutes away than just maybe bum you out immediately. And
I think the general public probably prefers that, even though it's sort of like your stuff with like sports TV content. Like, yeah, we like to complain about it, but I think overall you'd prefer it to the alternative.
Right. All right. So let's get back to shit hands. There's just not many people in your life, especially when they're your boss, if you were to say this to them, be like, hey, man, word on the street is this. And so I'm here to help you. That guy's not going to do this. He already doesn't wash his hands. He's bucking trends left and right. So he's probably not going to have an open moment with you. Be like, I'm really glad you brought this to my attention. This is great. Like now you're in the crosshairs with him. So you can't ever say anything to him because it's just human nature, even though it's disgusting. He's not going to look at this as help. This isn't the, hey, do you want a mint? This is, hey, do you want to start washing feces?
Yeah, you want to change your core principles.
Right. Yeah. Like what do you think, man? What do you think? So no one, it's so ridiculous for you. Well, let me put it this way. Most people aren't going to do this. They're not going to have this conversation. They've just accepted that this is the hierarchy of things, and now I just have to avoid them, and that's your deal. And if it's going to drive you that crazy and you're a germaphobe, you start getting on LinkedIn, right? But I can't imagine any scenario where a boss would have someone come in and be like, good job. They're going to get defensive. I wash my hands. You know what I mean? You already kind of know who this guy is. Be like, that's ridiculous. That's never happened or whatever. He's not going to go, I'm so psyched that Seth in accounting told me this, that everybody now could you be the most devious person ever? And this person clearly isn't, where you go in and you use this. And this is like the nasty stuff, right? You go in and be like, hey, I want to tell you something. I know you wash your hands, but dudes, Todd, Greg, and Keith keep saying you don't.
That's
and
diabolical.
I told them,
Holy crap,
just
dude.
Diabolical stuff where you'd have to not like your coworkers, right? And it endears you to him. It also brings some awareness to him, but you're not being critical. You're actually pretending that you
I don't care what they say about you, man.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on your side.
I think you're great.
Sir,
Yeah.
this has really bothered me. It's been bothering me for weeks. I know you wash your hands after you go.
Just Dwight Schrute it, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe they would insinuate such a thing.
Yeah. But these dudes are down on the desk and they keep saying this. So like, what do you want me to do? Do I have authority?
Deputize me.
Right. I can handle this.
On your behalf. Yeah.
Right. But then you go back to the guys and be like, hey, I took care of it. Like, how did I take care of it? Like, I told him that you guys had kept saying it. And I said that I don't believe that. But now he at least knows. So we're clear to fist bump.
What would it like an anonymous email just work? Could you just create a fake Gmail account? You got the guy's email and just say, hey man, I know we've been talking about it. I don't know. I'm not an IP expert. I don't know if you could trace that back to you. Maybe you can. Maybe it's a bad idea.
I feel like you could.
Somebody will probably email, but you basically just have to let the guy. I mean, he might not care. Again, he probably doesn't care. If he's like, if we're talking, boomer, maybe he's about to be retired or something. Who knows? That guy probably does not care at all.
Is it worth getting what?
Whoa.
Is it worth getting a burner phone? I mean, you want to talk about they'll be talking about you at lunch breaks 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Burner phone from 7-Eleven, text his number. Just be like, hey, wash your hands.
I know what you did in there.
Yeah, SIM card, destroy it.
or just now they're throwing ideas out there. Could you be like the guy, hey, I brought a black light into the office today. Everyone want to see what's going on?
Now I'm starting to think burner phone for your boss is the funniest thing ever. Just start
Certainly
texting.
dangerous.
If he's terrible, right?
Yeah.
If he's terrible. I mean, somebody's going to tell on you, though.
Hard to keep that under wraps, yeah.
Is there one friend you could trust? All right. Last one here. How do you tell your much older ex-girlfriend that you're still incredibly close with that you're seeing someone else? Tough. This guy's making moves. 61195 player comp. Ryan Gomes. I like that. Lots of 3, no D. Heavy on the feet. Prefer to get the ball out of my hands and often pass up open looks in favor of passing to someone who can actually dribble. More of a slow pitch softball guy.
Waterbury?
Gomes had some nice years.
Yeah, well, shout out to Connecticut.
Part of the KG trade. Part of history. During COVID, I dated a much older woman, 20 years older. Whoa. We broke up as COVID ended because the age gap was much more obvious once regular life returned. So just cuddling nonstop. You had to start going to stuff. With that said, we stayed incredibly close. We're practically best friends. She's genuinely the best person I've ever met. Super generous in all aspects of the world! ! I don't want our relationship to change as we stayed friends through many ups and downs. I don't think she's still in love with me, and I'm not in love with her, as our relationship is more so shifted to one that's much more like family. The problem is I fear our relationship at times gets in the way of both of us finding someone else. I haven't yet found someone. Oh, so this guy's preemptively worried about it. But I'd like to, and I also really want that for her. Yeah, optimistic and a historian. If and when I find someone, how do I tell her? How do I start this conversation in general? Appreciate you guys and love the advice. So how do you tell somebody you may be dating at some point, but you aren't yet? I think the bigger issue, and I understand what he's saying, is this friend zone thing. And, I don't know what that means, but assumptions can be made. But if we're staying clear of that, there's definitely something to be said of like your lack of motivation for wanting the emotional connection, obviously the physical connection, if it's being supplied in sort of a Postmates fashion, where it's like, hey, I kind of need this right now. And you have it, but you're not pursuing that anymore. Look, I think the easiest thing to say is just, hey, you need to cut it all off. And that way the thing that you'll want will be more, there'll be more urgency to want to fulfill that part that most people usually want in their day to day, that this is providing a substitute for it. Look, man, it doesn't mean you have to not be friends. And the fact that she's so much older than you, I would tell you she's probably not even that worried about this stuff. She realizes if she was interested in you, that somebody else is going to be interested in you at some point, and that's just part of the game. And I would imagine because she's been around a lot longer, and I've been thinking about this kind of in general as like a bigger thing, is that it's not so much as you get older, you get happier. It's just that all of the little shit that you've gone through and all the experiences and all the ups and downs, that you just are not going to let as many things bother you because you have a collection of things to either be happy about or to be upset about. And when you're younger, you don't realize that. And like anytime your life is derailed, you think it's like the end of the fucking world because you haven't had 10 of these things happen to you already. So as far as relationships are concerned, I'm not saying it's a little egotistical, but it could be, I could describe it that way. I'm not trying to do that to you. I'm trying to be fair, but I think you're probably likely thinking about this thing that hasn't even happened way more than she is. And you would be shocked. Not that she doesn't care, but how much quicker she is just to kind of accept it as the way life works.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've never been in this situation before. And I think you're
20?
right with the older
20 years
people.
older than you?
20? That's what he said?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think
Kyle,
you could probably ask her for money right afterwards. I don't know. I think it's probably fine. I think this is totally fine. And the hard part's over, right? We've had ones earlier on when you're just like, dude, you think you're about to destroy her whole life. And maybe she might sound like that for 10 minutes when you say it, but like the shittier thing is to lead them on, because you feel like you're like postponing this pain that you're going to get. This part's already done, right? You're just friends now, and you're like, I wonder if she'll think it's weird. Like, this is so easy. This is just like, do it, see what happens, I think. Just try to be the most respectful way that you can when you break the news. If it's, I don't even know if it's breaking news at this point. So
I don't really get
I'd say
it,
this is, I don't quite get the email either. I'm just saying stuff because I think I'm supposed to. I don't know.
Like, you guys broke up.
Yeah.
And he's just worried about what
Years
she's going
ago.
to feel like at any point when you start dating again. Because she's older? Is this ageist? Is this because she's older? I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't. I don't understand. Just live your life, man. Like, you don't really owe her anything. I mean, it's nice that you guys are cordial, but I don't know. You broke up. You're allowed to live your life.
Yeah, you don't even have like the, it was like a month ago, I don't know. It's going to look bad if a month later, I say this and she's like, oh, were you guys talking before? This is like, there's no date that you have in mind that you need to drop. So this is all good, man. Maybe that's what we're here for. Just to reassure you, this is totally fine.
Yeah, maybe that was just an easy one, or I shouldn't have read it.
Yeah.
Could it be that?
I thought like maybe she was like constantly trying to get back together with this guy, and he keeps saying no, and then once he starts dating someone, it's going to be like really real for her. But it doesn't. That's not what it sounds like. Because in that case, yeah, that probably would be like, in her mind, you haven't even broken up yet. But that's not what this is. Like, you've kind of gone your separate ways. I don't know.
Yeah, we ended on a dud. Sometimes you do that, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, maybe a quick. That was my fault.
No, you're fine. Honestly, it brought up the Ryan Gomes thing, and now I've Googled the legendary Jim Calhoun Ryan Gomes rant, so I'm going to go watch that after we stop taping.
Nice. What is it? We took Karan Butler. He was pretty good. Was it Karan Butler that he
Mecca Okafor?
Yeah.
Ben Gordon.
Those guys are pretty good.
Gotta love Calhoun. Yeah.
It's such a great rant. I love it so much. I love Calhoun, but I have a soft spot for him just because of what that program was and what it was never supposed to be. All right. Because of the Liv Tyler plane ride and then mentioning with Bill, I just like doing that stuff with Bill. I do. Speaking of shirts off, I remember Bill when I was doing those hoop streams for ESPN. It was like a last ditch effort. Like, what do we do with this guy? Do we just do this? And so I was doing these hoop streams. I was even traveling. Like, I flew back and forth like Connecticut, LA 3 or 4 times during that because it was like, hey, we're going to stream these things. I think Jacoby and I did one.
Yeah, was that Cassidy? Yeah.
Cassidy jumped into one of them too. I actually got to go to a couple finals games in, what was it, 18? Yeah, it was 18. And it's my horrible Steph Curry record when I go to his games. May go tonight. We'll see if he can bet the Lakers. It's unbelievable that a guy who wins that many games and is one of my favorite athletes to ever watch. Like, if I really piece it together, the record is.
You did get one win though recently, right? In the last year or two. All right.
I did. I got the win, I think, in the regular season game that I went to last year when I was in the walking boot from the torn calf, running 40s in my spare time. I can't believe you guys think I couldn't run a sub 640. Doesn't Eisen run like a 5'9"?
I thought McShay said to Bill like 5 something.
Yeah,
5.
That's
5'8".
I don't know. Anyway, where were we? Yeah, Liv Tyler. So we started talking, Bill and I, just the nonsensical stuff that we like to do. But yeah, back to Bill and the shirts off. I have like 7 different thoughts going at the same time right now. So I apologize for anyone that can keep up. I actually feel bad for you.
Yeah, I thought is this going to be a Bill shirts off story? Because this is, man.
Good luck if you're watching through the
right
podcast captions. Yeah.
And then San Sebastian salad dressing. I was like, are you serious? Bill, I was still with ESPN and he was like, hey, I watched that hoop streams thing. He goes, I think that has a chance. Like, I think it's pretty good. He's like, you're good on it. I was like, oh, okay, cool. He goes, you know what I think you should do is take your shirt off. And I thought, like, what does this guy think? Some fucking clown? Like, take my shirt off for an ESPN hoop streams next to Cassidy? Like, and Jacoby? I was like, maybe he's trying to drive my price down. Who knows? Who knows what this guy's doing to me right now? I remember just thinking, like, that was weird. But maybe he just felt like the stream thing was informal and it was just something to build to. So anyway,
Bill and metaphor. It wasn't like a let your hair down sort of thing.
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe
like
maybe I took it too literally. Kyle. Bill's gonna hear this and be like, "That's definitely not what I meant."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe he said that because he didn't want to say hair down or hurt my feelings.
Sure.
Yeah. That's probably what he meant, Kyle.
Wow. Life advice.
You just helped me out.
Help Ryan today. Yeah, that makes one.
I like the nonsensical stuff at the end with Bill. I like talking about TV shows. I love bullshitting with him. I actually think the audience likes that stuff as much as any of the basketball stuff. This pod, I think, would be a good example of that theory. So because that last email, and by the way, good luck to you, man.
Yeah.
We got an email here because I had mentioned, like, at some point, just like sitting next to Liv Tyler, I was like, I have to watch the tournament game. Like, I really wanted, and thank God I got to watch the end of Florida, Texas Tech, right? Into Bama Duke a little bit later. And this email popped in, and I think people understood it. Not a life advice, but I wasn't sure it was qualified for Friday feedback either. So we're just going to try to save the end of the pod here. The Sunday pod, we learned about Ryan heads phoning Liv Tyler for the Duke-Alabama game. It was actually Florida, Texas Tech, and then watch that one later. Thought about asking the obvious. Would he have done the same if it was Blake Lively? But the question is, what's the list of people he could be sitting next to where Ryan would have left the headphones out with an Elite Eight game on? Ooh. Elite Eight, no headphones. Keep the conversation going. Cross-country flight, 5+ hours. Who would I say? I can't put the headphones in right now.
Does it influence it if you're pretty sure they're eventually going to headphones you and you're just like, I headphones you first?
No, they want to go.
They want it. Okay, they want this.
Yeah.
Sans headphones. I like saying it that way, by the way, because it's a joke, inside joke with our buddies. Somebody tried to correct it.
I know who you're going to say, and it was the same person I thought of.
Ron Chernow?
Yep.
Wow, you guys are locked in.
Well, we were just talking about him.
Okay.
And
Mark
I think
Twain
that
book.
would be it. Yeah. Here we go. The glance at the bookshelf.
Yeah,
this is why you got to watch on Spotify.
What a plug.
Yeah. Is Ron Chernow the number one guy? I'd be like, the number one human. Male, female.
Cross-country flight. You might get a lot of stuff. A lot of history.
By the way,
hundreds of
audio
years.
book The Road on my way back from New York. Pretty good. I'm going to watch it last night. Book certainly better. We can just put a cap on that.
Did you cry at the end?
The audiobook for sure. That was a little weird.
You cried at the end?
It was a little weird on a plane. I was on the aisle because they upgraded me, so I couldn't like face the window.
Wait, you started. I mean, you're supposed to cry at the end of that book.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a badass and you don't cry at the end of that book.
I'll always talk to you. I'll never forget.
You cried on a plane by yourself in an aisle seat because you were listening to the Road audiobook, but nobody knew why you were crying.
Yeah.
That's where you end the pod. Yeah. That might make
me
cry.
Hugh Wargon.
Thanks to Kyle. Thanks to Ceruti. Thanks to Wargon and Jonathan Frias.
Cormac
Ryen
McCarthy.
Russillo podcast. And Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, absolutely. Check out Blood Meridian. You won't cry as much.
Audio booking it now.
Yeah, you'll be confused. Maybe I don't know. I read that book and I was like, am I an absolute raging idiot? It was tough. The dialect can be a bit challenging with the old CMAC. But anyway, yeah, thanks to everybody that works on the show. Ryen Russillo Podcast, video pod on Spotify, and also our YouTube page. Please subscribe at Ryen Russillo Podcast, Ringer Spotify, Wargon.
Hey, guys.
Must be 21 and older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.